We proceed with a fireside chat on the topic of gender equality within the Turkish Cypriot community with Mine Atli, lawyer and activist, Association of Women to Support Women, KAYAD, and Stella Kasdagli, co-founder of Women on Top.
Καλημέρα κυρίες και κύριοι και από εμάς. Hello ladies and gentlemen. In a time of great economic, social and political change, gender equality has been pushed to the forefront of international dialogue. So it's a great pleasure for me to welcome to the Cyprus Forum Mine Atli, a lawyer and an activist, to discuss how this issue has been playing out in the Turkish Cypriot community. So over the next 10 minutes, we will try to find out together what conclusions and possibly recommendations we can draw from Mine's extensive experience in the field that can be applied to bridge the gap between dialogue and action, vision and actual change everywhere in the world. Mine, welcome.
Hello. I'd like to apologize, first of all. As you can probably see, I'm in the car because we have a very important election coming up in the Turkish Cypriot community. So we're also campaigning, and because of the delay, I had to get out on the road. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to access the panel because there was no interpretation. Translation, so it was a huge shame. I couldn't understand what these important people who are very important in the political fate, shall I say, of Cyprus. I was very eager to hear what they had to say about gender equality, and it was a shame I couldn't understand what they were saying. I'd like to. It's very difficult to wrap up in 10 minutes, but I'm going to try my best.
And we can
first of all, the biggest problem that we had.
Please go.
Sorry.
We can talk about some of.
First of all, the biggest.
Go on. I can hear.
Okay. First of all, the biggest problem that we had in the Turkish Cypriot community, which I'm sure, even from what I've heard from my sisters in the Republic, are that they are probably very similar problems. The biggest problem that we have in the Turkish Cypriot community and that we had was that we didn't see the gender gap, the gender injustice, the gender inequality. So for Cypriots, for Turkish-speaking Cypriots, for Turkish Cypriots, when you ask them, do you believe that men and women are equal in Cyprus, they would say yes. But when we ask the same Turkish Cypriots, we had a survey in 2013 where we asked 1,000 respondents, do you think men and women are equal? And their response was 90% yes. And we asked the same respondents, when a man and a woman works, who do you think ought to be home first? 73% of the respondents said the woman ought to be home first. So the same people that were saying that the men and women are equal were also dictating to women this extra duty the moment they start their shift at home. So we had the similar problem with all problems that directly are gender related, for example, domestic violence. So 6 years ago, when we started to intensify our efforts for the struggle against domestic violence, we conducted a survey, and we noted that 1 in 3 women in the Turkish Cypriot community were subjected to physical domestic violence. And we also identified that the perpetrator or the survivor, when we looked at their demographics, it was completely independent of where they were born, where their parents were born. It was completely irrelevant to their religion or birthplace, or even economic income or education level. And there was a huge backlash against this when we first started to disseminate the results. So even the issue of domestic violence, it was approached by the Turkish Cypriot community as though it was some kind of immigration problem. For the majority of Turkish Cypriots, in particular the progressive community, they believe that Turkish Cypriot, they believe that women, the only women in Cyprus that were being subjected to domestic violence were women who had migrated from Turkey, which was of course not true. So the biggest problem that we had was that the problem of gender injustice was not seen. it was completely rejected. And so were issues that were directly related to gender injustice, like domestic violence. And obviously, if you don't see a problem, you don't formulate policies to overcome them. So 6 years ago, we didn't have legal aid. So if you were subjected to some kind of rape or any kind of abuse in your home and you didn't have money to afford a lawyer, you couldn't access the family courts for a protection order. But if you were convicted for rape, then and you couldn't afford a lawyer, then you had legal aid. So this was a huge issue. And now, through our efforts, we were able to lobby and advocate for some kind of legal aid. So we've overcome that. There was no shelter. There is now a shelter. The police have now set up a unit, a domestic violence unit in the police department. And we had other issues related to gender. For example, a woman wouldn't be able to keep her surname if she were married, or she wouldn't be able to give her surname to her child. And we were able to overcome these issues. But obviously, we still have a long way to go in terms of legislative and policy change. The one that we are particularly lobbying for at the moment that we need to focus on is a domestic violence legislation. Unfortunately, we don't have domestic violence legislation. Another issue I think that promotes gender injustice, when we look at the understanding behind it, is that we have a huge issue with women trafficking and prostitution. I mean, anybody who has traveled to the northern part of Cyprus, when you're traveling on the high road to Morpho, you can see on your right and your left, amongst the schools, amongst the entertainment grounds, by the parks, you can also see brothels, nightclubs. They're called nightclubs. But we know that that's where prostitution occurs, and we know it's somewhere that breeds women trafficking as well. So
Mina,
it's very,
if,
it's
if
very,
I may ask you a question,
sure.
you talked about the changes that have been taking place, and I was wondering what kinds of advocacy and what kinds of initiatives did you find that work best when you talk to people who put gender equality towards the bottom of the agenda? What have you found that works?
We had to, the main thing that worked was using technology, using social media to enhance our allies. So we had to explain to women and the community at large that gender equality, gender justice will in turn benefit the entire community. And we did a lot of lobbying for women to see how this directly affected them. And of course, when you link gender injustice with domestic violence, we know that 1 in 3 women are subjected to domestic violence. That's when you get your allies. So if 1 in 3 women are experiencing domestic violence at home, and we somehow are able to bridge the gap, or the bridge between the power and control that is the root cause of domestic violence and the imbalance of power in gender justice, that's when they start saying, well, okay, if I want to end this domestic violence, it's not going to work with trying to change my husband or my partner. We as a community need to change, and the change will come through gender justice. I think
Definitely.
that's what works.
Yeah, I have one last question for you. What about the COVID-19 crisis? How are you finding it affects women in the Cypriot community?
Well, it affects Turkish Cypriot women like it does all women around the world directly, not only because it increases things like domestic violence, but economically as well, it hits women. And in particular, the biggest problem that we face is with childcare, even for independent women who are financially independent, who are in healthy relationships. When you look at the child's caring arrangements in most families, you will see that it's the woman that's taking more time off of work to be able to look after the child, or she is expected. The employers expect that the woman will take time off rather than the father taking time off. So economically, it's also affecting women more than it is men.
So what do you think?
And we're seeing that, especially in times of... Sorry?
What do you think needs to be done in this case, politically, socially, economically?
There needs to be a very good partnership with education and with policymakers, with politics. So one of the most important things that we did, one of our best good practices, was that we worked with the authorities in charge for education to introduce to them our curricula, which had gender justice at its focus. We devised and created a gender justice education curricula that also focused on healthy relationships and domestic violence and sexual health. But at the core of it, we were trying to explain gender stereotypes and how that would negatively affect the economy of the society as a whole. And what I can say is that if we don't work together to overcome these gender stereotypes, with authorities responsible for education and with these messages being reiterated by policymakers, the COVID-19 pandemic will take us 20 years back, because we see in times of emergencies that people are clinging to what is more secure. And it's very difficult in the Cypriot communities anyway, because the gender problem is a peripheral issue. You know, the main issue is the Cyprus problem, and the gender problem is a peripheral issue. And now if we have the Cyprus problem at number one and then COVID-19 at number two, or vice versa, then, you know, our battle at the hierarchy drops even further down, and this will cause a regression, and we can't let that happen. It took us years to get us where we are now, and the battle needs to continue, and we need to know that only as a society, if we all work together, we can overcome this crisis. Like a war, we need to overcome this crisis together as all Cypriots, and as men and women together, not with women at home and men outside dealing with the economy on their own. That's not how it will work.
Yes, I will. I'm fully supporting what you say, that the fight must continue and we must push gender equality higher up on the agenda. So thank you very much, Mine, for being here with us today. Good luck with
Take
everything.
care. Good luck. Bye-bye.
Bye.